Many of the world's bloodiest revolutions originated in universities, originated in library reading rooms. So we should worry if the institutions that are supposed to supply the intellectual fuel for a free society in fact start to produce toxic waste that is threatening to fundamental freedoms.
We want to dismantle anti-blackness campus crime. We want to give some sense of solidarity and provide safety outside.
You and I are not the same person. Empathy is not necessary for you to understand that you're wrong.
And frankly, there's just too many white people in here, and this is a space for people of color. So just be really cognizant of the space that you're taking up.
It's easy to make light of it because so much of it is absurd. But it is no laughing matter in the end because this is how it begins. Now, it may not necessarily lead to the killing fields. Not every authoritarian or totalitarian intellectual can bring about Pol Pot. But one can't simply assume that it'll be all right this time. Because how does the tide turn if all the major institutions have capitulated or seem likely to capitulate to a profoundly illiberal ideology?
It is crucial that we view our current moment through a historical lens so that we may know where we are and where we are likely to be headed. The only way to find and implement solutions to the destruction of our institutions by the woke cult and to repair the damage it has caused society is to be aware of how these bad ideas spread and to protect the liberal principles we've inherited from past generations.
The Reformation was predicated on a new technology. It was only through the printing press that Martin Luther's ideas gained currency. And at first that seemed awesome. Suddenly everybody could hope to read the Bible in their own vernacular in a cheap printed edition. But what Luther and his fellow reformers underestimated was that once you could print the Gospels, you could print anything. And an almost equally successful bestseller of the time was the book that helped you find witches and burn them or hang them. So when we think about the Reformation historically, what we see is the way a new technology combined with superficially appealing ideas that had kernels of truth in them to produce appalling polarization and a rapid escalation from verbal to physical violence. One can't understand the woke Reformation without the internet. Because if you had tried to do the kinds of thing we see today, the witch hunts, the persecution of heretics, the cancellation of hate speech, if one had tried to do those things with just print media, it would have been extraordinarily difficult. The internet's created a huge new infrastructure for self-publishing and then promoting through crowd tactics radical ideas that in the past would not have made it into the newspaper or onto radio or television because an editor would have said, this is nuts. Extreme views and fake news get eyeballs on screens. The business model is eyeballs on screens. That's how you sell the ads. It's as simple as that. If that did not exist, wokeism might well exist in the junior common room of King's College, Cambridge. But good luck getting it out into a wider public. So that is a huge deal. And it's the reason that the original Reformation required new technology to happen. If Martin Luther had not had the printing press, he would have probably been burnt at the stake and forgotten about, like earlier heretics who challenged the Roman Catholic Church.
We are now at a crossroads of competing ethical frameworks and moral values. This moment in history is an important one in which we cannot stay silent if we want our rights, freedoms, and values to remain intact. The technology that has allowed the cancerous ideas of the woke cult to gain hold in our society is also available for us to use in opposition. So we must speak up and not allow the woke to have their way.
Just like we have to always face, bad ideas that might spread and take hold in our schools, especially because that's where our young minds are nurtured. This is just another one of those moments. Like, we have to challenge these bad ideas, and they are everywhere. I just hope that everybody knows that they will come for you. Like, they will come for every single person. Nobody is safe from this ideology, and we as a society have to have a united front against it, one that's filled with compassion and common sense.
There's no good end to this. We know historically that the moment you set up criteria to assess people by race and gender and ethnicity and so forth, we know the end result of that. We saw that in the early 20th century. This leads to genocide. This is no good. It's easy to get people to agree in a utilitarian calculus that, it's okay to sacrifice the few for the many. Okay, the moment you go down that path, then you can say, instead of killing the one worker to save the five, let's kill the 5 million Jews to save the 50 million Germans. That's the logic of genocide, when it's tethered to an ideology that promises utopia.
The woke cult is using historical guilt and subversive tactics in an attempt to attain the lofty ideal of an equitable society. Ibram X. Kendi has even explicitly said, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. So, according to the woke, it is now time to flip the script, to make those who are deemed oppressed gain power over those who are deemed oppressive. Anyone who is labeled a victim by the woke are now encouraged to use that position as one of power and influence to get their way in the world.
White guilt has promoted this idea of critical race theory as a salvation for the supposed sins of its past. But I want to tell white people, you know what? You need to stop being so shamed. I come from a culture that all we are is shamed as a mechanism for controlling us. And what is happening now is these critical race theory ideologues are simply shaming white people into submission. Like, this is a good society. America is a good country. I am a Muslim woman in this country who enjoys more freedoms here than I could in any Muslim majority country in the world.
What I think made America exceptional, and perhaps the other Western countries, is that they had created environments where individuals could be creative, where individuals could be innovative, and the woke philosophy is snuffing that out. And I think there is a sense of pride and achievement and dignity that goes with getting yourself out of a situation where you're a victim and you're a victor or a survivor or whatever it is that you want to call it. But to be trapped in this mentality that you are a victim of something also says that you have no power over your own life and that you're powerless. And I don't understand how people can be attracted to that. I don't understand how that's attractive.
We have to stop allowing ourselves to be bullied into accepting a new morality that pits victims against oppressors and leaves everyone worse off. Despite whatever adversities we face in life, we should encourage ourselves and others to take on a victor mindset instead of a victim mindset. The woke are using an appeal to our desire for fairness and justice for those who may be victims in some way. But the truth is that they use social causes like anti-racism and anti-sexism as tools for social clout and political power to get their way. And no one wants to speak out against them for fear of being called racist, sexist, or bigoted. As a result, the woke cult are getting their way in our schools, churches, the media, entertainment, and nearly everywhere else in our society. We need to stand up against their encroachments on our free speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of the press, and no longer allow them to shame us into a new kind of perverted morality.
All of these intrusions on people's rights are going to be battled in the court of law, but we have to speak up in society. And so whether this means write a letter to the editor, write an email to your neighborhood association, write a Facebook post, like, do all of this with moral courage in whatever way that you're comfortable. And I just want to encourage everybody to raise their voice, because that's the only way ultimately that we're going to be able to create a cacophony that challenges all of these bad ideas. And that's the way that, bad ideas go into the dustbin of history, because the people challenge them.
Regardless of our political affiliations, we do need to wake up to the fact that these woke activists, their narrative, their philosophy is really destructive to all of us. I listen to some of my conservative friends who say, you know what, I'm not worried about it, it's a liberal problem. It's not a liberal problem, it's a problem for all of us.
It is really ultimately Americans themselves that will do this country in if you allow critical race theory ideologues to hold us hostage. Like, I will not be held hostage, and even if I'm the last person standing, I will stand up against this. But, we need, obviously, our entire nation to wake up to this and have the moral courage to challenge these folks from a place of compassion and common sense and critical thinking. But be strong. You have to be strong.
As Americans and as human beings, regardless of our political or religious beliefs, we all need to unite against the toxic, divisive goals of the woke cult. It is time to start calling out lies when you hear them, to stand up against people pushing for forced equal outcomes in our schools, businesses, and the arts. It is time to start making our position known, that we won't support an ideology that demeans and divides us. We need to attend school board meetings, speak up in churches and other groups, and not allow ourselves to be pushed around by the woke mob. Through some incredible advancements of science and technology, we now have the ability to connect and communicate across geographical divides and organize like never before. So we ought to use the same technology that allowed the woke reformation to spread in the first place to put a stop to this cult-like movement that has swept our nation and the world. Because our educational institutions have been catastrophically failing us, we need to stop sending our kids to corrupt universities, stop supporting these institutions, and even build new ones where we are able to. We can no longer be afraid to speak our minds and continue to live our lives in silence. As we push back against woke ideology, let us not forget our universal goals of equality, fairness, forgiveness, and truth.